Welcome to The Thriving Mama, the podcast that teaches you not just how to survive, but to thrive in motherhood. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Davis. Trauma comes in many forms, from a tease from your siblings to an accident or even a seemingly benign medical visit. We know that the majority of the seeds of trauma are planted from ages 0 to 5, and from there, they can compound in various ways. And one that I commonly see in practice is medical trauma, but more specifically, birth-related trauma caused by not feeling safe, having any control over your body, or interventions, whether they're necessary or unnecessary. Today, I am beyond excited to share the story of one of my longtime clients, Emily, who is graciously sharing her story with us today. We'll be unpacking so much from her own journey and experiences with birth and emotional trauma to the challenges of being a stay-at-home mom of 4 girls and more. Some of the main highlights include how doing the emotional and trauma work transforms your health and outlook on life by giving you more resilience, how anxiety can be replaced with knowing and confidence that you can handle any challenges life gives you, and suggestions on how to prioritize self-care specifically for what you need as a mom in different seasons of life. If you're confused about where to start addressing your own health or you've tried everything and nothing has worked, I offer podcast listeners a free global health check where I'll evaluate your physical, mental, and emotional health and provide useful resources to help you on your journey. You will find that link in the show notes. I'm so excited today. I'm having my very first interview with a mama of mine. And it's Emily, and Emily and I have been together for a very long time through all sorts of life ups and downs and babies and challenges and, all of the things. And so I'm so glad that you're on with us today to share your story and so grateful that you're here. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be able to talk with you.
I am really excited because I've been waiting to we're like in the 40s on the number of episodes now, and I've been waiting to do an episode like this for a while. So I'm really excited because I think it's really important for moms to hear from other moms. And I know obviously I'm a mom too, but I'm also coming from, the position of, clinician and, trauma healer and all of that. So it's really nice to be able to hear from moms who are also living, mom life daily and, the experiences day in and day out of what's going on. So super excited that you're going to be sharing that with us today. And so first off, how I wanted to start this was, just how are you right now? How are things going? Just so everybody knows, Emily is a mom of 4 girls. So she's got a lot on her plate.
Yeah. Things are going. I mean, we're in the middle of prepping for Christmas and it's 6 season. So we're trying to figure out balancing all the things and all the babies and survive and try to thrive in it. And it's always an adventure.
Oh, absolutely. So just kind of give the audience an idea of the age range of the girls, because she is a busy mama. She's got a lot on her plate.
Yeah. So my oldest is 9, and then I have a 6-year-old and a just fresh 2-year-old and a 7-month-old. So we've got a big age range and then 2 really close together. And it's a wild time. I'm going to be completely honest. It's crazy.
I know. It's like you've got all the girls and then their girls, right? So you've got, right. It's funny. We've talked about before the differences between boys and girls. And I feel like it's almost a blessing sometimes, when you have just the one, because you know what to expect. Because sometimes when I'm dealing with like one of my kids being a boy and a girl, it's like there's different things, different issues for different kids. So it's kind of funny, and how girls sometimes handle things versus boys and vice versa. So at least there's the consistency of knowing what to expect, right?
Right, exactly.
To some extent, because they all have their own personalities, right? Oh, and I know you know that my only daughter is very sassy. So she's smart. She's also sweet, but she's very sassy. So
yeah, we have a whole lot of sass over here.
I bet. So I wanted to start off first with talking about the most recent baby because she was a surprise when we were doing the Thriving Mama program together, it was really interesting and almost serendipitous given your history. So I wanted to start off first, how did you feel when you found out that, you were pregnant in the middle of the program? So let's start off there.
I was excited. I was much more excited than I feel like I would have been had I honestly not been doing the program. Because I felt like even I think it was probably halfway through. So in the few weeks leading up, I did feel like I was finally starting to figure out thriving in a way that I had not been able to thrive before as a mother. And so then finding out that we were pregnant, it was like, okay, well, we're going to do this and it's going to be fine. And if I can thrive with 3, I can thrive with 4 and we'll make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember it was like we talked about before. I remember you saying your milk supply was going down and we're like, oh, maybe you're getting your cycle back or lots of things. And then all of a sudden pregnant, surprise baby. And it's, surprise babies it's a little bit different because, you guys had planned all of them before. And, surprise baby is just obviously it's a beautiful and amazing blessing, but it's funny when the surprise baby, every friend of mine that has had a surprise baby is like, oh my gosh, it's one of those, super, super shocking things. And I mean, I feel like my youngest was actually a surprise too, because I had my son, we had the 2 miscarriages and then I was like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to go through the trauma of the miscarriage again. And then I got pregnant, which was interesting.
Yeah.
And yes, obviously I was very excited. But it was scary too because of the miscarriages and the trauma that had been associated with that. And I had actually been I was doing something very similar to what I do, in the kind of the heart math and HMT world. And I had to stop I want to say it was the middle of my second trimester because I felt like the emotions and everything coming up were so much. And it was trauma. I would say if I were to do it again today, I would have been fine because I've cleared out the big stuff, but it was because it was the big stuff that was coming up. I felt it so strongly. So I was like, maybe I need to not do this right now. Maybe I need to finish this work after she's born. So yeah, I mean, there's so much that can come up with surprise babies and the big emotions. But I think for you, something that we've talked a lot about, the birth trauma and medical trauma has been a big part of your journey for many years. And so I would love if you could share your experience with the medical traumas and the birth traumas and kind of walk the audience through, going through those things, but then also how you've handled them.
Yeah. So, starts with my first baby, first birth. We had kind of gone into it really wanting a natural birth, wanting to do things with no meds, had taken the Bradley class and her labor and delivery went nothing like I anticipated. And so I ended up having an epidural, hospital transfer from birth center, 38 and a half hour long labor. It was a lot. And so after that, I, just in processing that, decided that if I had had a doula, if there had been someone who could have spoken to us in a way that was outside of just the 2 of us, I think that would have made a huge difference in how that whole process went. So I ended up becoming a doula when my first was 18 months old. And so then anticipating future babies, I had big plans, big dreams for how my births would go, and was thrilled when I got pregnant with my second and planned a home birth. And things went really beautifully until they did not. The labor was quick. Everything was smooth until she actually came out. And then I ended up actually having 2 4th-degree tears. And so my beautiful home birth ended up being a bit of an emergent situation. We transferred to the hospital. I had to go into the OR to be repaired. had lost a lot of blood, was in a bit of shock. And so there was a lot of trauma that was carried from that. When you go into a situation where your body is already not okay, and then your mind isn't fully clear because there was that cocktail of hormones happening immediately postpartum, but it was not focused fully on my baby. Instead, it was kind of this experience, this interruption of what would have been so good and so beautiful, had to be, the focus was not on her. It was on what to do for my body. So I ended up having this repair done. And then within months, the repair broke down. And so then I had a rectovaginal fistula, which is a hole between the rectum and the vagina, and had to have that repaired about a year postpartum. So I ended up weaning my baby, which I really didn't want to do. And I promise, to this day, that child would still be nursing as a 6-year-old. If I had let her, she loves it. And she did love it. And so it was really hard on me to have to kind of cut that off and end that aspect of our relationship early. So then I had this surgery to have that repaired. And then a few months later, that broke down again. And so it was just one thing after another. And in the midst of that, all of these things coming up from the trauma from the first surgery, it being this area of my body that is supposed to be private, but so many people were involved in it. And it being it was really hard. It was really hard. So, having to work through that and knowing going into a third baby, that if I was going to have more children, they were going to need to be C-sections. So I worked with a team of doctors here, to fix things as much as possible without having another surgery after my fistula repair surgery. And so I wasn't even sure if my pelvic floor would be strong enough to carry more children. And thank God it was and is. And so I went into a third pregnancy, having spent the time working through trauma, trying to heal my body in every way possible, grieving the fact that I was not going to be able to have the birth that I wanted, the birth that I believed would be best for both me and for my child. But the desire to bring another soul into the world won out. And I'm so grateful it did. So we had our third, and then, and her C-section was beautiful and very redemptive. And I felt like I was able to choose that and knowingly walk into that, and prepare myself in as many ways as I could. And then, did it again for a fourth. So
yeah, you are such a superwoman for all of the stuff that you've gone through, because I remember, kind of walking through that journey with you, especially the fistula. Like that was pretty profound.
It was really hard. Yeah,
it was. And you bring up something that's really important, is the vulnerability of a woman in that space and time, and the advocacy. Like you had mentioned for the first baby, you wish that you had a doula or an advocate there for you. And I feel like doulas are so much more than just that advocate. They also hold this space for you. They help make it a safer space for you, because that is probably a moment when a woman is most vulnerable in her life, right? Like that is a very, very vulnerable position from a physical and emotional standpoint. And like we were talking about before we hopped on, is like we're finally seeing where the medical world is acknowledging medical trauma and also acknowledging that, there are things that need to change. And when you walk into an encounter, whether it is surgical, birth, or just in a speaking, a consultative role, that we should be, top of mind thinking about mental health and emotions and all of that. And, truthfully, it'll probably stay very clinical in the, conventional medical realm. But, for me, that's something that I've tried to bring into my practice for years, is like holding the space for the vulnerability of what is existing in the relationship that we have, because it is, it's that when I'm working with women about medical trauma, so much of it, I would say at least 50%, probably somewhere closer to like 60 or 65. A lot of the medical trauma that I work with women on is birth related because there are so many things that happen in the heat of the moment because there's either medical necessity or a woman or her partner or who's ever in the room doesn't have like a strong enough voice to say, hey, we don't want to do this, or they don't want to ruffle the doctors or, whoever's feathers, there's so many things that happen there. And that stays with you, especially in such a vulnerable time. And then like you were talking about, you have, the trauma, the aftermath, right? You have like that, and how that plays out and affects your ability to bond, your ability to nurse, how long you want to nurse. You mentioned that. I mean, nursing your baby is such a beautiful experience for those of people who can do it. I know like we've talked about, like for me, I did it and I did it for a long time, but it was a challenge. And like, I was like one of those minimal milk producers, but I really wanted to do it. And I ended up suffering through it at the end because like you said, it's your 6-year-old, right? That really wanted to nurse. Yeah. So my oldest was the one who, maybe not to this day, but I'm pretty sure he would have nursed until he was like 7, 8, or 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he loved it. Right.
Yeah.
He was the one that I weaned at 2.5. And I was just like, it was a lot, especially like, but I felt good about the way we ended that. And then I knew going into the second child that it was so hard for me. And I had Everly when I was 42. And so it was like one of those things where I was just like, I was tired, like energetically, I was tired. I mean, I went miscarriage in December, miscarriage in June, to then getting pregnant again in November, which I don't recommend for anybody.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So much. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot. And because the surprise with her, it was like I hadn't planned on having a baby. So I was actually serendipitously doing a lot of like, just like the reparative and restorative work. Like I really focused in on my gut and my immune system, just balancing myself out after all I had done. And then on the emotional side too, which I knew it was very present in my mind that I needed to be doing the emotional work too. And then I got pregnant, but I feel like it also drained me and I was really tired because of it. So, and I know you can speak to that having all the girls. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about right now, how you are, how are you managing time and making time for yourself too, with essentially you've got 2 babies and 2 big littles.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. I feel like there are days that go much more smoothly than other days. And, I think trying to convince my older kids to be helpful, and they are so helpful when they want to be, really encouraging them in their roles as older sisters and the opportunities that they have to love on the babies, is helpful for them, and they love engaging with them. So it is helpful to have that, when I'm trying to literally get anything done, because it's a lot. And there are days when, I don't do as much and we have an easier dinner. And then there are days when I'm able to actually make everything that I want to make. And the goal, I feel like my standards have just had to be lower. Like we need a vegetable and we need a protein. And so if that vegetable happens to be frozen, that's fine. If that protein is not exactly what I want it to be, that's okay. It's just trying to find these little ways that honestly I viewed as like a survival mode sort of situation, and have kind of come to view it as this is actually us thriving. Like we're okay, and they are eating whole foods that are good for their bodies, and are nourishing them and helping them grow, and that's the goal. So yeah, and then sleep is hard. My children don't tend to sleep through the night until they're at least 3 or 4. And it just is what it is. And so it's very much a sacrifice. and an acknowledgement that this is what we're doing. We're giving up a full night of sleep. And so it has been over 2 years since I've gotten a full night. And that obviously is hard, mentally, emotionally, physically, all the ways. But it is a good and worthy sacrifice for these beautiful girls. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah, it's a lot.
I think you point out something that's so huge, and it's something that I try to really emphasize when we're in the program, is reframing things. I think especially as brand new moms, but also younger moms and maybe moms of like only one child, because I think life after one child is very different when you start adding on more siblings. Is changing the ability to have a flexible framework and reframing what you think is ideal and perfect and thriving, right? The ability to say, hey, oh yeah, I want to make this, giant meal for my family. And I want it to be like all organic grass-fed meat, and then have multiple vegetables that are organic and all this, that's fresh, all of the things. Yes. Ideally, so many of us would love to do that.
Of course.
And right. But you realize that getting that protein and getting that vegetable are what's important on the plate. It's not, all of the places where it came from, that's something that I think, and especially in this time where, we've got social media out there, and it's like there can be shaming around a lot of things. And that's why when I'm working with people, I always try to, say, hey, it's like, we don't have to get you from eating like a standard American diet to like the opposite end of the spectrum, which is, the organic, the grass-fed, all that. Like, it's baby steps. Like, change happens over time. And just getting you to go from like standard American diet to whole foods is a huge shift. And I will take that because that's a massive win, right?
For sure. And I will say, it took years. I've been working with you since my oldest was a baby. And so it's been at least 8 years. And I, in 8 years, have gone that full spectrum of standard American diet to eating grass-fed, everything, whole foods, all of the good things. And now have kind of had to settle in this, like, it's a frozen vegetable, but it's an organic frozen vegetable.
Yes.
And so, it's just, we have to do what we can. And it is a season. And I think keeping that in mind and being able to acknowledge this is happening right now. I will sleep a full night again. I'm going to get 8 hours one day. It's just not today. I will be able to make beautiful meals for my family. It's just not right now.
Yeah. And the mindset is huge. I think where a lot of moms get bogged down is in that mindset thing, because they see what's on social media and they're comparing themselves to other people. And they're like, well, if I don't do X, Y, and Z, if I don't, have this perfect looking family, feeding them all the right things and, taking all the supplements and doing all of this stuff to make my family healthy, then I'm not a good mom, or I don't have value. Right. And so that makes me so sad when people get caught up in that. Right. We need to say, hey, what's best for me? What's best for my family? And what do we need to do to survive the season? Like you mentioned, like that is huge. Like, we are all in seasons of life. And it's funny because I think, especially when you're a newer mom or you don't have any older children, it's like you think that infancy is like the hardest thing. And then you have a toddler and that's the hardest thing. And then they get a little bit older and then it's just different seasons. And each season comes with different challenges, right? It's like, it's really interesting to me how I was that person. Like, I kept on thinking, oh, I'm never going to sleep. I'm never going to get a full night's sleep again. Right. My hormones are never going to be balanced. And like, here we are, I'm totally fine now. Right. How many years later? But even like the developmental challenges, like dealing with like, the sleep regression around 4 months old. Like, my son was a great sleeper until that very moment. And then from like 4 months old to about 3 or 4, like it was bad. It was like all bets were off and I did not get any sleep. And it was a struggle. And I feel like that was also probably a little bit, contributing to why I had such a hard time, maintaining my second or I should say it would be fourth pregnancies, I like the second and the third, I know my hormones were not as good as they should have been. And I had progesterone insufficiency, which is why I could not, keep, maintain the pregnancies. And so that was a struggle. And so, and you know how important sleep is to your hormones. And I had been working on it. So it's like, there's so many pieces of the puzzle there. And like, and then you get into the aspect of like, with your kids, like the hormonal, the attachment, the oxytocin, and like how amazing that is. But then it also can get into the realm of like the older siblings being jealous of the younger ones. Do you ever see that happen in the house with your girls?
Yeah, it goes back to that balance of for an example, we have had the stomach bug in our house. And so the older girls had it first, and we've wrapped it up with the baby having it, and having to interrupt putting the older girls to bed so that I could run and be with the baby and help her and settle her back down, and then go back to the older girls and apologize and acknowledge like, hey, you are equally as important and I love you just as much, but I've got to be with her because I'm the only one that can help her. And it's just because of the stage that she's in. And you understand that I need to pause and that I will be back. But she doesn't understand that. And so I feel like there's a lot of explaining that comes into play, but also taking the time to make them feel special and loved and giving them what they need it's a hard balance.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Like so much, I think being cognizant and aware as a mom of all your children's feelings, and then just the family energy and dynamic as a whole is really, really important in explaining those things to your kids. Because I know my son had a very, very hard time for many years with his sister because he's 4.5 years older than her, and he had us alone for that many years. And it was like, oh, now there's this new little person on the scene and she's getting more attention than me. So there was a lot of explaining, and it was tough. He was very, very resentful for a very long time, even when he was older. Like I'd say from a developmental standpoint, much more able to understand that she was a baby and then toddler and needed a little bit more, attention and care. He did not like that. He fought it kind of tooth and nail. So that's something that we've been, we have had lots of conversations about. And the cool thing is now he is 11 and a half. He's almost 12 actually. And in the last year, probably I would say definitely by the time he turned 11, but maybe right before that, we've seen such a beautiful change in him. Don't get me wrong, they're siblings and they fight, but there has been he definitely has stepped into the role of big brother. And while he could sit there and get into like a little tiff with her, the next minute, if somebody was doing something to her, he would be all over that person. Like whenever he hears that she has struggles at school with often boys teasing her or something like that, he's like, let me get my hands on him. I'm like, we don't resolve things with physical,
right.
We don't resolve conflict with physical, violence here, child. But
it is sweet.
It is sweet. It is sweet that he's thinking that stuff. And it's really interesting, like learning, like teaching him how to walk through his emotions. Like that, for instance, he's like, I just want to punch the kid in the face. I'm like, nope, we don't do that. No, we talk, we use our words.
Right.
So it's interesting going through all of that. So it's like in your family, are you seeing the dynamic where the older ones are, especially the 9-year-olds, starting to step up a little bit more and kind of be the big sister and like really enjoy that role?
Yeah, she really does. And it's so beautiful. Because she has been a big sister for all three. And so seeing the change, like you were talking about with your son, when your daughter was born, her having us for 3 years and then having this new little person on the scene. And in addition, a traumatized mother, and having, she's so resilient. And so having her walk through that and then having another baby when she was 7, and watching her just fall in love with this tiny little person, and their bond is so, so sweet. And now having her with our youngest, where she's so good at knowing and anticipating her needs already. As as a 9-year-old, and she's going to be a great mom if that's what she chooses to do one day. But she really loves them.
Yeah. Oh, that's so awesome. I think it's like really good experience. I feel like I'm the oldest in my family, and I definitely, I'm 3 years older than my brother. And then I'm like 10 years and 10 months older than my sister. And it is interesting when you are that much older than your siblings, and you can really, you watch them grow, and you sort of help raise them, when you have a family and multiple children. And definitely, I would say it definitely helped me, but it also was one of the reasons I didn't have kids when I was younger. Granted, I was in school for a million years, so there was
Right.
that. Yeah, there was that. And I wanted to get out and practice before I had kids too. A little bit anyway. But yeah, they get that. I also was just like, I knew the responsibility that it took to raise babies, and I wanted to be there, and I wanted to be a present mom. And I also wanted to make sure that I had patience and as much as I could without knowing, without having had my own kids. But yeah, I think it definitely affects you in different ways. So yeah, it was, that's so cool that she is like able to experience that, and it's helpful for you too, because, there is a reason there's that African proverb, it takes a village, because, especially back in that day, all of the aunties and, cousins and grandmas, like it was a whole team of people raising babies, and we don't have that anymore. And I feel like that's one of the huge reasons that so many moms suffer now. They kind of, they suffer alone, often in silence, sometimes not in silence. Sometimes they have some support, but a lot of times they're suffering alone. They're, often, whether it's a stay-at-home mom or a mom that works, there's challenges to both of those scenarios, and you feel pulled in different directions, and you feel the guilt from not being able to, have the time with your kids that you want, or, be able to do certain things for them or with them. And so it's like we live in a very different world. So having those extra kiddos around can be so much of a blessing, right? Because they can help entertain each other. If they're old, if they're older kids, they can help you out in other ways, like around the house. Like both of my kids, they have chores, they have chores that they help with, or with on it, would say on a daily basis, they're helping around the house and just doing things. And so that's, it's kind of a blessing in the world that we're living in now, to have that. And that's something else that I would say for moms is to really reach out to other people. If you are struggling, even if you're not, having your village is really important. Be like one of the things, like, I don't know if you remember us doing this during the Thriving Mama program, but it was like community, right?
Yeah.
Who are your people? Yeah. If you can't pick up your kids from school, who's going to do that for you? If your kids are all sick and, your husband can't go to the store for you and you need something, who's going to do that for you? Like, who are your people? Who's your tribe? Like, who do you have that's going to support you? Who can you talk to if you are struggling and just need an ear, an ear that understands? Like, you got to figure out who those people are, because holding all of that inside yourself is a lot, right? And I feel that just adds to the trauma of so much of what we've already experienced in our lives, which, that is such a tough place to be at. And so, I wanted to also ask you, about, this last pregnancy versus the subsequent ones. How was that one any different, the pregnancy and the birth versus the previous ones?
Yeah. So I would say that, honestly, it was probably my easiest pregnancy. I think having done so much work, in all kinds of ways. The emotional work, the trauma work, and then also having the physical support. And, I remember texting you and being like, surprise, we're pregnant. What do I take? I need backup. I know that I am, nutrient deficient from having just had a baby and nursing her for 9 months. And So I think, having that as kind of the foundation of I'm going into another pregnancy and having actively been doing and continuing to do the Thrive Mama course at the beginning of that pregnancy was honestly, I felt like I was set up for success just because I was actively doing this work that was good and beneficial. You mentioned doing that work with your daughter when you were pregnant with her, when you were first pregnant with her, and how it was hard and you kind of needed to take a pause on that. And it is hard, but I felt like I had done the hard in between pregnancies. And so I was able to step into this surprise pregnancy and know, it's going to be fine. It's a surprise. It's not what the plan is. But it's going to be fine. And so her pregnancy, was good, was generally easy comparatively. I do struggle with nausea and vomiting for a while in each of my pregnancies. And this one, honestly, that time frame was much shorter, and I was very grateful for that. And then her birth, I don't know. I felt like I walked into it very confidently. It's like it was not my first C-section. It was obviously not my first postpartum. And so I kind of knew what to expect, and I was very grateful for that. And I felt like the recovery, I don't know, in my experience and in the experience that I've had with doula clients, that first 2 weeks is such a roller coaster. I mean, you just have to hang on, and just push through and know that it's not always going to feel like that. And so I felt like I was able to walk into, especially that immediate postpartum, knowing, it's going to be fine, and really leaning into my community, and leaning into the people that I have around us that really were able to step in and love our children. And something that we talked about in Thrive Mama was, the community aspect, but also where can we find help in other areas? Is there something that we can outsource? And so I had somebody cleaning the house for a little while, and I had somebody who was watching my older kids, who would come for just a few hours a week and hang out with my older kids so that I could have time with the baby and time to recover. And so those things, giving myself permission for those things and acknowledging I don't have to do it all. And in order for me to thrive, in order for me to be able to love all of these children in a way that I want to love them, I need backup. And it's okay for me to have to sacrifice in some areas so that I can, sacrifice financially in some areas.
Exactly.
In places, in order to put money towards having help in the house and having somebody watch my kids. It was a good thing. And just giving myself permission for that was really worth doing.
Right. Yeah. I think that that's such a good point, because it's interesting. One of those things, it's like we were talking about before, again, it was like kind of like that conscious awareness. There are so many moms who know they need to do the work and they know that they need help, but instead they're spending money on, things like Stanley Cups. It's like, it's one thing to have one, but like to have 10. I literally know some people who have 10, but then they're like, they also won't make the decisions or choices that take them closer to health or emotional, stability and calmness. They keep on, trying. It's literally filling that void. They're filling a void.
Yes. Yes.
They're filling a void with things, because also when we do that, it's an identity, right? Your identity is matching, something that you're seeing either out in public or you're seeing on social media, right? And that's something that humans have been doing for all of human history. You find what is like to you because, kind of that's your group and that's how you survived historically. Now it's kind of working against us in a way, because it's like you see all these people with all these things and doing this stuff, but, very much in, our Western society, it's a society of consumerism. And I feel like it's gotten us away from so many core values, right? It's gotten us into things and not experiences, community, people, family, that type of stuff, right? And that I think is harming us, right? Because like we have done the same thing where we've made many conscious choices on how we're going to spend our money, right? To, either have experiences or have time, all of those things instead of having things. Like, I feel like in the last 2-3 years, that's been a big thing for us. It's like in teaching that to our kids, like, I feel like it wasn't as much my husband and I, but like, relatives, giving our kids lots of stuff, like especially the first grandchild, like there was lots of stuff given. And so they start to expect that. And so I was like watching this and I'm kind of like, whoa there. I'm like, we need to stop this. I'm like, that's not like the real world. Like you just don't have stuff like lavished on you all the time.
Right.
Right. It doesn't rain presents out of the sky. So, right. So it's like, I like making my kids understand that. And I feel like they're finally at like almost 12 and 7 to a place where they're getting that. Like we were just watching a Christmas show and it was, what is it? I can't think. Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It was their Christmas. And in the end, at the beginning, the kid wants a video game console and like, we'll go to any lengths to get it. And then by the end, he's donating it and he donates a bunch of his gifts. And the mom says, sorry, this Christmas didn't turn out well for you. And he's like, no, it turned out perfectly because he understood like the giving aspect and instead of like the receiving. And both of my kids got it. Like they actually mentally got what was happening there and connected with it. And I was like, okay, like something's sinking in.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
Because like they're understanding that. And I think that's really like, it's really important for them to understand these things. But also, like you said, for moms to like give themselves permission to not be perfect and do what they need to do. And also, like you said, you guys made a conscious choice to, spend money on giving yourselves a better quality of life, right? And in turn, it's going to give your kids a better quality of life. And you're going to be modeling to your daughters that this is important. Self-care is important. Community is important. Prioritizing, these things is important rather than the opposite of just kind of going through the motions where so many mamas are stuck. And you also brought up another really good point, when you were talking before, and it was the knowing. Like there is a very distinct difference, and I only know this from doing all the trauma work myself. There's very little I fear anymore. There's very little that scares me. I have a knowing because I've worked through all of the emotions and the anxiety. Like I probably haven't had anxiety, like true anxiety, with the exception of the miscarriages and then my pregnancy with my daughter. Definitely the anxiety there because of the trauma of losing 2 babies. But in general, probably haven't had much anxiety in probably about 10 or probably 15 years. But before that, I definitely was a much more anxious person. But that kind of coincided with me like starting my journey into the emotional and trauma work at like 12, 13 years ago. That's when I started like peeling the layers back and getting to the root causes. And it's important to understand that people often, and this was me too, thought it was a destination. It like not a journey. It's like, oh, I do this, I did EMDR, I'm good. Well, I wasn't. And then I did tapping and I did some talk therapy. And then when I was pregnant with my daughter, it was called QNRT, which is quantum neuro reset technique. And it's got a lot of similarity to what I do in the HMT realm. And it will bring up some of the big traumas. And when I was pregnant with her, it was really hard to process some of those really, really big, deep wounds. But after the fact, I was good. And working through those. But it was funny because I always thought, oh, I'm good. I've dealt with these, but little things will surface. And they usually surface at times when we need them the most. We need to get that lesson from it. It's like your subconscious throwing you a bone, like, hey, pay attention to this. And so I went through a big one of those this year and I've talked to you about it. And it was really interesting because the middle of it coincided with when you gave birth. And it was super interesting because I was like at a very energetically and emotionally vulnerable spot. And I got the message that you had given birth to the baby. And I just like, it totally shifted something inside me. And like, I just felt I was feeling so much just happiness and joy and gratitude for you guys. Like, I love working with you guys. I was so happy for you, so happy that everything went well. So it was really cool, but it was like, you know, doing the hard, ugly, painful work, going towards that is what, you know, allows us to heal, but also gives us that knowing. And that knowing is what gives you like the emotional confidence and resilience. And like, that's, like I said, like, there's not much that really, really scares me anymore or makes me feel anxious. It's because I have that inner knowing. And I think part of it is removing all of the emotional issues and the trauma that it clears out an emotional and energetic space for other things like love and joy and authenticity and things like that vibrate at a much higher level, but also clears the way for your connection to whatever higher power you believe in, right? So I work with all different people who believe in, you know, some people say God, some people say source, divine, spirit, Holy Spirit, whatever it is. But I think that is the other piece of it. It's like you clear out the, you know, kind of emotional baggage, or I would say like the emotional sandbags that are keeping your hot air balloon on the ground, and then you can rise, right?
Yeah.
And it allows you to be open to receive. It allows you to be open to just like connection, like real connection. And that's something that I find a lot of the people I work with and I've experienced myself. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this too, but like just being so aware of like all of the goodness and amazing, you know, just love and life around us. And not always seeing the negative or the scary or the fear or all of that stuff. But it really does. It really helps solidify your emotional and energetic connection to whatever your version of the source is, right?
Absolutely. And I would say anxiety has been my sandbag friend for so many years, especially I think as we've been working through, there were some things that happened in the past that were kind of weighing things down and that I was holding on to. And that I think sort of played into the birth trauma, but the birth trauma was such a big thing for me. And I had done EMDR and I did tapping and I was trying to do all the things. And I think that full and complete healing, I think for me has come in multiple ways. Part of it, a huge part of it being spiritually and through God and through his work in my life. But then in addition, the HMT that I've been doing with you has really just made such a huge difference in allowing me the freedom to not have to be anxious. Because like you said, like there's just no more fear. There is no reason to fear, because whatever is going on in my head that is the anxiety, is not a reality. And if it were to become a reality, then I would walk through whatever that thing is, just like I've been able to walk through the things in the past. And so I think, like you said, it's just the knowing that allows us to be. And once we can let go of the sandbags and truly rise, there is so much goodness and beauty that we can see everywhere. And especially, I mean, when it comes to children, I know so many moms who struggle with anxiety. And, you know, what if my kid gets sick? What if they have a fever? What do I do if they break a bone? I mean, there's so many things. What do we do about emotional things that happen at school? And there's so many things that you have to walk through with your children, and being able to walk through that in freedom and being able to carry that joy and that love as a mom, but also handing that to them and helping them acknowledge and know, like, we don't need to be anxious about this because we can approach it. It's the reframing. We can approach it in this way. I think hopefully is helpful to them as well. And certainly has made a huge difference in my life. So,
oh, that's amazing. I'm literally getting tears in my eyes right now because it's like, no, honestly, this is like what you just said is why I do the work I do, because
yeah.
it's so hard to watch other moms struggle, just people in general. We live in a pretty crazy world right now, but to watch so many moms struggle and think that they have to do it alone when they don't. There are so many resources out there. And so that's just like, I'm like sitting here, I'm like, don't cry. Like, got tears in my eyes. But yeah, like literally that is why I do this work, so that moms, they find themselves again. They find the joy. They're not anxious. They have like a full, rich life. Like that,
Yes.
isn't that what we all want? That is what we all want. And it looks different for everybody. But I mean, I think that's the end game for all of us. That is what we all want. And knowing that we have the emotional and energetic resilience to know that, like you said, we can handle these challenges that come our way and support our kids through it and walk through it with them and walk through it ourselves and come out whole on the other end. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. And that doesn't mean that there might be work to do after the fact, because a lot of times there is, but that's part of the part of it. It's the journey. Like, I feel like that's been a big, like, knock on the head for me this year. I kept on saying it earlier in the year, but then I had things that were coming up. And I know it was intentionally for me to be able to do the work that I do. And I had some high highs and some very low lows this year with a lot of this stuff. And so much of it was surrounding my like miscarriages and how that was handled. But other little things have kind of sprouted up from that. And it's like, I'm grateful. Yes, it did suck. Moment. It sucked crying for like weeks on end and just like letting all of that out. But it had to come out, because I always tell people you can only repress your emotions for so long, or suppress. I should say suppress. Repressing is when you're not conscious of it. Suppression is when you're consciously shoving something down. It will eventually surface. And for me, it surfaced after probably 8 years. Yeah, because my daughter's 7.5. So 8 years it surfaced. And it was like my body was like screaming and like holding on to me and shaking me. Like, you must listen to us now. And so yeah. And so it was very hard, but I also feel a lightness and an emotional freedom. And it was funny because I thought I had healed from the miscarriages because I could talk about them without crying and I could have conversations. And it wasn't that. There was still stuff about them that was lingering on, little pieces of it. Because apparently when I was doing a lot of the work, I wasn't getting fully to where I needed to go. And that's one of the, the important pieces of HMT is like getting to that initial sensitizing event where, point zero when everything happened. And so, a lot of times our subconscious will kind of quote unquote protect us and hold us at a certain space and not let you go there until you're actually ready. And so I guess for me, it took a little bit of time. And that's okay. Because for some people, I know there are some people I work with when they can get deep down into it very quickly. And for those others of us, it's like, we'll do some work, we're feeling good. And then all of a sudden it's like life, we always say, butt up against life, like that's kind of how I tell people to gauge how you're feeling. It's like, when you butt up against life, what's happening? Like, what's triggering you? Is there anything that you're feeling? Because those are the things that we go after, doing the work, which, so it's like, that's how you kind of measure your emotional resilience. And I find that obviously the more I do this, the less anything bothers me. Of course, we all have we have the days, but instead of having a moment and then letting it ruin the rest of the day for me, or having a moment and letting it spiral into something big, now I have the moment, I feel the emotions, I deal with it in that second, and then I move on. Right. And I feel like that's a big piece of the freedom that comes with, doing all the work. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a choice.
Yes,
that is a choice. It's a choice to train our brains and our bodies to be able to do that. And it's a choice to choose to do that in the moment instead of, for me, I would have this anxious thought and it would land me in bed for hours to days, depending on whatever it was. And I would just let it spiral out of control. And now having the tools and knowing that freedom exists and I can choose that freedom has made a world of difference in allowing myself to just let it go, deal with it, and move on.
Just to like wrap everything up, if there were any, points or tips you would give to moms about just self-care first, like what would you say? Because I know you have a lot of experience as a mama, having gone through all this stuff for years, and then also as a doula. Like, what would you say?
Yeah. So I think self-care is going to look different in every season. And I think that it is finding the things that you can give to yourself, whether it's, for me right now, my self-care is a cup of tea at the end of the day. Whether that looks like me drinking my tea in bed right before I fall asleep, or I'm sitting on the couch and reading or watching a decluttering video on YouTube, whatever that looks like. It's just this moment of like, I can be alone. Nobody's touching me. Nobody's talking to me. It's just for me. But that has looked very different in other seasons. I've taken the girls' trips. I've gone out with friends, for hours on end. And I can't do that right now just because of the ages of our kids. And so I think really, first of all, acknowledging that it's just a season and it's not always going to be the way that it is now. But in that season, being able to find something that is good and beneficial and gives you life is just really worth doing, because everybody says like, you can't pour from an empty cup. And it's true. Somehow you need to find something that will breathe life into you so that you can breathe life into your children, into your spouse, your family, whoever.
Oh, that's great. That's great advice. And I love was so just spot on, because it's different for all of us. It's different in different seasons of life. And again, it kind of comes back to that, the idea that, the goal is always kind of progress and not perfection, but also the goal is also presence and awareness, and just understanding that, there are challenges. Life is always going to have ups and downs. No one has a perfect ride, even though social media might want to make it look that way.
Right.
And just giving yourself grace to know that you're great. You're doing great. As a mom, like we're all doing what we can do to survive this journey. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I've been waiting for this. I was waiting for the baby to be born and for her to be born and be old enough where you could have a moment to be able to do this, because you really are such a great example of how transformative the work can be, the inner work, the emotional work, all of that, the trauma. And because you have overcome so much, so much. And the version of you now is so different than the version of you that I met 8 years ago. So it's been amazing, and just my honor and so much gratitude for being able to walk with you on this journey, because that's how I view myself in the realm, as a partner and a guide rather than telling you what to do. Right. So it's been honestly, just an absolute joy to experience this with you.
Well, I am eternally grateful for you and for all that you have done, for the space that you've held, and for the work that you have entered into with me. I'm so grateful. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And give the girls some hugs from me. And I am excited to talk to you soon and hear about everything that's going on.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. Remember, knowledge is just the beginning. Taking action is what truly sparks change. If you're overwhelmed and don't have enough energy to make it through the day, I invite you to book a free 20-minute coaching call with me. It's a no-obligation chat where we can discuss your health goals and how I might be able to help you achieve them. Visit the link in the episode description to book that call. Until next time, keep striving for wellness, and remember, you have the power to not just survive, but thrive in motherhood.